to assist communities with source water protection. We used to call it wellhead protection, but now the term is source water protection. It's drinking water protection. And basically, this committee has been working to what we call a source water protection plan. I'm required to do a minimum of 3 source water protection plans a year. And a plan consists of identifying water resources, identifying threats to water resources, coming up with protection strategies to protect water resources, and plan for the future. So basically, while we're here tonight, there's a public hearing on a set of proposed regulations. Basically, what the impetus was a proposal for a, I guess we'll call it a bottling plant, immediately adjacent to the village of Fairhaven's Wells, right across the street. And the town placed a moratorium, 9 months, and I think you extended it another 3 months, to allow time for the town to research it and come up with, if necessary, some regulations to address water extraction facilities. So that's the principal reason I was brought on board, but in order for me to work with the town, we have to do what's called a source water protection plan. So these proposed regulations are part of a plan that we're working on. Basically, what we've done is propose some amendments to the town's existing land use regulations, and I kind of just want to highlight what those are. The first is to regulate what is termed water extraction for bottled or bulk water sales. Basically, it's bottling plants for potable water purposes. The town up till now has not had regulations on these. The proposed regulations would not prohibit these facilities, but would require them subject to a special use permit. The requirements for the special use permit include a number of tests that would have to be conducted, basically to ensure that there's no negative impact on the village's supplies or any neighboring private well supplies. And that would hold true of any potential future water extraction, similar water extraction facilities. Initially, we were going to do what's called a wellhead protection overlay district, and that's just protect the area around, in this case, Fairhaven's Wells. But in looking at the data on the wells, there wasn't sufficient information to come up with a exact wellhead protection plan that I would recommend to pass. To do that, you need a great deal of pump test data, monitoring data in other wells. And unfortunately, the wells were put in the late 60s and in the mid 80s, and the testing requirements at the time didn't necessitate that order of monitoring. So the other approach, which I recommended and the committee accepted, was to do an aquifer approach, so that we're protecting what we call unconsolidated or sand and gravel aquifers in the town. And that map is the effort of about 6 months of field mapping, collection of water well data, existing reports. Another scale version of that map you have. There's some color ones up here if you need one. I won't go into a lot of detail, but we decided that it was pertinent to do what's called a unconsolidated aquifer protection overlay district. And the purpose of this would be to protect not only Fairhaven's wells, but a number of other public and private well supplies in the town. And basically, as the regulations are proposed, commercial and industrial uses within this overlay district. The town has, I believe, 5 other overlay districts. So this isn't a new concept in Sterling. But this overlay district would require, for commercial and industrial uses that require a special use permit, that they submit additional information, and there would be approval criteria for such uses within the overlay district. And quite simply put, these commercial industrial facilities over the aquifer would not adversely impact the quality or quantity of groundwater available to private wells or public water supply wells. Like I said, the boundaries of the overlay district are based upon the mapping that I've conducted. It improves a great deal. Improves a great deal on the existing mapping that was done on a whole Lake Ontario basin scale. So this is specific to the town. Drove every road in town, researched all available well data, looked at all the soils data, all the well logs. So I think it represents a large improvement over what was previously available. In addition to the overlay district and the regulations on bottled and bulk water extraction facilities, two other things that are in the proposed regulations. There's a change in revision in the subdivision regulations that the planning board consider what we call green infrastructure, which is preservation of recharge and reduction of impervious cover in the aquifer areas. And the other is that a general requirement for any special use permit is that the planning board could require testing to ensure that neighboring water supplies and water resources would not be adversely impacted by proposed land use. And I believe that would be town water, not necessarily specific to the aquifer overlay. So the effort started out being just to address the Fairhaven area, but it became obvious that there was a need, in my opinion, to protect all the groundwater resources in the town. And so that's how the effort became. And I just thought it would be useful if I came and gave a little talk on how we got here. I don't know if you want to open up. If the board has any questions for me, or
Yeah, I mean, my thought, I was like a brewery horse, thinking only about the Fairhaven. And this obviously is much better because it's townwide.
right. I mean, we could have adopted the wellhead approach. There's two reasons I didn't. One, legally defensible. The data wasn't there. As a hydrogeologist, master's degree, 21 years experience, I didn't feel comfortable that there was enough information that it would stand up, quite honestly. So I think there's other users in that well. What's that well? Cosgrove Road well, same aquifer. So then I kind of looked up and said, well, there's a lot of aquifers in town. So it made sense to protect everyone's drinking water, not just the folks in Fairhaven.
Questions from the floor?
Do you ask questions of the speaker or you, or how you want to handle it?
Yeah.
Do we ask questions of the speaker or only of you? What do you want to handle?
Well, I think you can question the speaker.
We could question.
Yeah, and if you would just stand and announce who you are.
Yes, my name is Virginia Fischera, Dr. Fischera. When I look at the laws, the drafting on the bottling and the potable water is extremely explicit and gives a great deal of strength to the town to ensure well quality. But when I look at the overlay protection district, it's extremely vague, if not actually sort of irresponsible in question number 2, to just say all they need is a statement as to the degree of threat to groundwater and surface water quality that would result if the control measures that were identified may have or failed. This statement isn't even required from an engineer or a licensed engineer or from a geologist or something. So I guess I'm very concerned, and so are other members, and one can't be here, Dr. Harris, they wrote a statement which I'll get to the board during the hearing. We're very concerned about the fact that there doesn't seem to be the same protection for all of the water in Sterling that there is for just bottling. So industrial uses seem to get off rather light here.
Virginia, you had a question. Virginia and I have been emailing quite a bit the last few days. So, you had a question for me about industrial water usage. New York State Department of Environmental Conservation regulates any withdrawals of 100,000 gallons per day or more. I would be hard pressed to find any industrial uses that would be less than that. So,
And bottling, and how does that compare to bottling?
bottling water, the reason we even did
No, the volume. I don't know the volume.
there's no volume with bottled water, and the concern of the group, the committee, was that if we just relied on the state regulations, someone could come in and put couple wells and basically say, I'm taking 90,000 gallons per day, and it would not be regulated. And so that's why the town proposed its own set of basically regulations for water extraction facilities.
But they're not for water extraction facilities, they're only for
For
potable water.
That's correct.
And that's of concern to many residents. Especially because there's a proposal before the town for a mine that would be right over one of your aquifers. And the proposal is to use the well on site to take care of all of the uses and needs for water of that operation. And it is possible for them to, as you say, use less than 100,000 at each well and get away with not even having to.
No, it's a total.
Total what?
It's a total withdrawal with the capability of withdrawing 100,000 gallons per day or more.
Total withdrawal per
Which
parcel?
comes to about 69 gallons per minute
Per parcel?
per use. So if a use has 3 wells and they produce 25 gallons per minute each, that exceeds 69 gallons per day. So that would trigger state involvement.
I have more questions, but why don't I let a chance and I'll come later.
To answer your specific question, you had a question about the site plan requirements, is that right?
It's the waterhead, excuse me, not waterhead, the
What page?
waterhead protection district. On page 11 of the handout, number 2, in section 8. All the person has to do is make a statement as to the degree threat. They can say, oh, there's no threat whatsoever. They've met the requirements of this overlay protection district, and the statement may be thoroughly professional and responsible for all of them. But oh, if it's potable water, we've got several pages having them in so that we know that there's
Number one,
more
let's
information.
remember there's no requirement now, so it's an improvement, number one. Number two, the planning board has the discretion to require a lot more information than this. If they're not satisfied with the statement or the description, they can ask for more details. They can ask for a TP. They can ask for a protection job. And the criteria here, number 3, is it is broad, but it was actually broad on purpose. Because if you want to get very specific and say, you shall not withdraw groundwater by such and such percent, it's hamstringing the people who are trying to review it. So,
But you felt comfortable answering them about water.
we had an existing moratorium, and this law had to specifically address water.
But it's not titled about the water. It's titled groundwater protection.
And it is protected groundwater.
But it's a partial groundwater protection. Again, I'd like to let everyone have a chance to ask questions.
Anyone else have something to say or questions?
I got one. If the town was gonna do a water district and wanted to put wells in,
Right.
would they be required to abide by the same rules?
I believe so.
That's kinda what I
There
thought
was a
too.
thinking though in New York, and they get in trouble for saying this, are towns subject to their own zoning? I think most towns would be subject to their own zoning, but yeah.
Right, so,
And any well, but actually, you mean for water extraction purposes? No. No, that's for bottled or bulk water sales.
well,
Which is
wouldn't,
my point, exactly.
wouldn't that
If
be
you're
a
a public
bulk?
water supply, you've got your own set of regulations. You've got to do a 72-hour test. You have to go through the DEC's criteria for pump tests.
But,
The whole reason we came up with our own set of regulations is the fear that someone could come in and skirt the regulations of 100,000 gallons per day or more by simply saying, we're going to take 80. I've seen it happen. I'm working with one now, it's a fish aquaculture facility. They're required to do a permit over 100,000. And they're just running it now at like 70 or 80 just to see if it's working. And the DEC is like quite nervous because you're supposed to have a permit for that. And we have a long process. So if the town would put in their own wells, and you would have to go through a more rigorous testing requirement than that, because for public wells, you have to go through the Department of Health, and you have to go, chances are, you're gonna be using 100,000 gallons per day or more, or have the capability to do it. So you will have to do a DEC water withdrawal application, 72-hour pumps, and all these things that we're proposing, but even more. So, what Virginia's talking about, I guess, is, I think your fear is fracking water.
Among other things.
The town,
Vertical fracking is.
the town does not have, I read the zoning very well, there's basically, let's see, there's this list, I should have a color version of it. There's a list of allowable uses in the town, and currently, an industrial water extraction facility is not allowed, not permitted in town. So I'm not sure what you're fearful of, it's not allowed in town.
And industrial work.
What are you talking about?
Would you tell me how it's worded?
It's not worded.
Well, what is there?
Any, correct me if I'm wrong, Elizabeth, any use that's not listed here is prohibited.
Correct.
That's why we had to add water extraction facilities. And we could have banned them, but I think when there's an existing proposal, that wouldn't have been fair. So, as I understand it, if someone wanted to come in and start taking, and that's their reason for being their industrial water supply, they would not be allowed in the zone. And if it's another industrial purpose, and they wanted to take gobs of water out, they would be required to file a site plan review, and that issue would now come up, because now we have a trigger in the regulations, where before we did.
Yes, but the trigger is only permissive, it's not obligatory.
Any other questions?
Again, I don't want to hog the floor, so I've got other people speak.
So, I mean,
Members of
as
the
far
board?
as concerns about other facilities, what we try to do is look at what's already in the zoning, and you've got quite a bit already regulated in the zoning, and didn't want to feel the need to, if it's not already allowed, then it's not already allowed. So,
Could you tell us how far along you are in your own work with the?
Sure. The source water protection plan, the water resource mapping is pretty much done. I've got to map some of the public water supply wells. That's what I was doing before, and if people realize, but in addition to Fairhaven, there are approximately half a dozen other public water supply wells. Get the data for those, water quality data for those. Fortunately, the town did a survey 3 years ago for the purpose of water district formation, but that gave me a huge amount of information, and I'll be summarizing that, so I got to finish summarizing that. And the other thing I want to do is, our plans require a public education component. So, although this is kind of educating the public, I envision a workshop where I present all the maps and people can come and see what type of wells they have. We can discuss individual well protection and water quality issues. So there'll be probably a workshop on that. I envision the plan, the draft plan being out there in, I'm sure, hoping about 6 months.
So there will be time for people to make comments in the future.
For the plan.
Yes, for the plan
The
itself.
law is just one component of the plan, as I see it. We have what we call regulatory practices, and we have non-regulatory practices. This is the regulatory component. The non-regulatory component of my plan will be the public education, the outreach, and that will be in subsequent months.
Okay.
I got one more question. Do you know of any businesses that have jumped through all these, or met all these criteria and opened a water bottling plant?
Yes,
Where is that?
there's actually Village of Canajoharie. You know where Canajoharie is?
Yeah.
Of course, they were in a tough bind because Beach Nut left.
You're right.
And their water department was like a lot of places, the water department kind of fed a lot of the municipal budget. So when they left, the water operator there was he's a very smart fellow, said, boy, we got a lot of water coming out of our springs and stuff. Crystal Geyser, Roxanne, it's a French company, they came, built a bottling plant on the village property. And if you go to certain source, that's the water you see. So there's one. I come from New England, home of Poland Spring. I visited 4 or 5 other bottling plants. The bottling industry is, it's, a lot of people around here don't have the best of wells, so they're probably drinking bottled water. It's bottled water, right there. There's purified water, which that I believe is. And then there's spring
Well,
water.
this is well water, but
Okay.
I just use a bottle again.
So it's a large industry.
He's trying to get good stuff.
It's a large industry, what we can talk about the economic benefits of a bottling plant versus impacts. And what we try to do in this law is allow the positive, the economic impact, but not to have a negative impact on, in this case, the village and other wells in the area.
But they're both large companies that
Right.
has the lawyers to go
Right.
through all this.
Right. This would be nothing. They would probably be doing all these requirements anyway, just to protect their what's. So, but why we put that in there, we had a proposed use, we had a moratorium, we had to address that. And I think the committee's consensus was, we didn't want somebody coming in and just kind of skirting that 100,000 gallon threshold and then wouldn't require any testing at all. So we wanted to have some testing requirements to make sure the village's wells were not negatively impacted. And I think this does that.
The chair of the meeting said that the zoning commission worked with you and for writing this. Did you use a template that is from another town, or was much of this written by your?
I don't believe in templates, Virginia. I've done probably 100 of these. I'd like to look at what's in the zoning and basically see if there's areas there that, there's weaknesses that need to be protected. And so, for example, I did not use a template. I may have borrowed language from other places I've worked. But, for example, the whole bottled water standard section, the town already has a section that dealt with things like wind facilities and what else?
For the overlay?
Yeah, well, not necessarily overlays, but certain uses, gas stations, and certain uses have their own set of regulations.
Right.
So I said, okay, well, it makes sense to me, then we'll just have a set for bottled water facilities. So honestly, this is one of the first ones that I've dealt with where we had an actual proposal and we had to address that in the regulations. In the other communities, it's just something out there. And for example, town of Woodstock, I worked there for years. The threat there was a company wanted to withdraw water from their watershed, not directly to a plant. So most of the time, it's just kind of out there. We're concerned in the future about it, but in this case, it was an actual developer.
I have more, but does anybody else want to? Okay. Now, your technical assistance program fact sheet has a paragraph. Once the water resources have been inventoried and mapped, New York Rural Water Association assists with an inventory of potential sources of contamination. This includes a review of information from source water assessments, this is the part I'm interested in right now, and analysis of land use from real property data,
Right.
and a compilation of facilities that are regulated by state and federal agencies.
I'm doing that right now.
Are you in the process of that, or are you finished that? You're in the process of that?
Process.
Okay. From my standpoint, and I think from the standpoint of several other residents, that part is important and would to inform what you come up with for the legislation. In other words, I think jump the gun on the legislation and you assume that there are no other land use issues that would be coming up or that would not already be covered. And I think you may discover that, for example, there is a mine already at 131 Stanford Road, and the discussion is to expand it. So you already have a land use of a mine there that, you can't get out of this by saying, oh, it's a proposal. There already is a mine there of longstanding use. So I think that those are things that many of us expected to see before you would come up with legislation, especially legislation that is so weak for the overlay protection district.
I've driven every road in town. I have accessed all the databases, including the website I showed you, the DW Maps. So I have all that information. I have not put it in a report yet. I took all the land cover, the national land cover data set into account. All that was taken into account when I looked at the regulations. The truth is, there are not many regulated facilities in Sterling. There's only one, maybe two gas stations. There are really not many.
Did you look at the gas station?
I went to the bathroom there.
No, I meant, did you look at how they're regulated? For example, the gas station at 38 and 104 recently purchased new land and expanded, and yet did not, to my knowledge, go to the planning board and since there's a new parcel that the tanks are on, you would expect that they would come under the new zoning regulations because you can't grandfather a new parcel. But so I don't know how water would even come into that. So I guess what I'm saying is water does. They're not far from the Sterling Creek. They're digging, they're excavating, they're taking out tanks. And how does the overlay protection district, how would that, for example, if that had already been passed and this gas station was sitting out there, how would it enable residents to say to the planning board, hey, you've got a gas station, special use permit that you haven't enforced and have them apply for, and you also got the overhead protection for those aquifers. How would the aquifer part operate? Just give us an example.
Well,
How
I
that
believe
would
the town, the town already has site plan review regulations for gas stations.
Right, right. But the thing is the overlay district is called an overlay district, is it not? Because it overlays everything. So how would it improve and deal with the dangers that might
Okay,
occur to the
well,
aquifer?
let's take that
Just as an example, because I know people are tired of hearing you talk about the mine.
Sure.
So let's talk about the gas station.
First of all, gas stations, of course, are also regulated by DEC.
Right.
They have primacy for all of that, just like they have primacy for mining.
Well, they only have primacy with respect to their own state laws.
Yes.
Because the town has primacy with
Sure,
its own
on certain
respect to its
things,
own.
yeah.
With respect to its own.
All right, so say theoretically.
That's page 11 is where it talks on the
Alright.
laws, right? What you're doing.
So,
10 and 11.
I mean, a gas station's pretty obvious, right? Let's say they would require details of all conveyance, storage, distribution, generation, handling, use, and or treatment of any sewage, process waste, aqueous waste, petroleum, hazardous substances, hazardous waste, solids, radioactive material, and incidental waste. So they would require all details of how that's going to be stored, what are the descriptions of the provisions basically for ensuring basically degree of threat, what would happen what the control measures are, and basically what, in this case, would be provisions for off-site disposal of, say they had a spill, how would they remove that? So that's all handled here.
Yeah, but what about B? What would the statement look like? What would you expect it to be like, and by whom would it be written? And how could that section be amended to be strengthened to actually assist in the cases of industrial uses? Because the statement sounds like all you do is you sit down and say there's going to be no problem, and then the planning board says, oh, okay, that's all right, that's nice, we've got that. What do we really want the planning board to have in the way of a statement so that they've protected the people and their water?
I'm not on the planning board.
No, I'm saying, what do we want in this legislation?
I'm happy with the legislation, I don't need anything else in the legislation.
But your mission is to be dealing with communities and finding out what their needs are and what their desires are, and then to interface that with your background and your knowledge and your experience, and to give us that assistance.
This level of detail is totally consistent with the existing site plan. In other words, we could have, and I've done this for some towns, point by point, by point, by point, by point, do this, do that, do this, do that, do this, do that. If you look at the existing zoning, when it was written, it's not written that way. It's not consistent with, that's not how it's written. And
But
by,
the water bottling is in many ways more extensive than any of the other zoning.
Because that was the scope of our work.
that was the more directly addressed the moratorium.
Right, but what I'm saying is you
Would
said.
you be happy if we didn't do any overlay? Because this is.
No, I would not be happy. I'm
Okay,
very glad that
so-
you've begun the work, but I'm just saying I think this is
Okay.
premature because it's in a draft form that, for the bottling, it's more detailed regulations than for pretty much any of the other special use permit uses, which is good.
I mean, this is
I'm
pretty
not objecting to
detailed
that.
on like Wayne's facility.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
Dr. Bashira, many of the people are here for another purpose. They're here because we all love paying our taxes, so I think there are gonna be some questions on assessments and things of that nature.
And you will recall that each time I've taken the floor, I've started first by saying I want to make sure everybody has a chance to speak. So you and I are on the same page, and I see there is someone who wishes to speak, so there's no problem.
I'm just saying that I think you need to give the planning board some credit.
Yeah, that's basically what I'm trying to
If
do.
they're gonna have to come to the planning board with this, and that planning board's gonna have to look at that statement, you need to let I think your planning board, I've been to a few of the meetings, I think your planning board's gonna say, oh, you just can't hand me a statement
You
that
just
says
can't-
everything's
yeah.
gonna be
I
good.
mean,
I wanna know what's gonna be
I
good.
guess that's what my point was.
And that's what I think his point was that he's giving you the start, okay, you gotta bring a statement, but with that statement, that board's gonna is gonna
I
question.
mean, do you think they would just take the
They're
word
gonna
of someone
just-
saying,
yeah.
oh yeah, we got some
We
spill
checked it
pads in
all
the
out,
back,
it's
you know,
fine,
if there's a
they're
spill.
gonna, you know, any of the planning and the zoning board of appeals that I've been to, they have asked in-depth questions, and you do have to put a little faith into the different boards in the town, that they're gonna protect you, because we do try, you know, I
And
think
the
the
other
boards do try to protect.
I guess the only thing I should make you aware of is that I brought the gas station and the fact that it is not on the planning board's agenda I brought that to the attention of the clerk of the planning board, of the town clerk, and of the town supervisor, and all of them just raised their hands and said, I don't know what you're talking about, but anybody driving down 3814 saw that the gas station was going in on a new parcel. So I'm sorry, but I think I have to take Ronald Reagan's trust but verify. That's my
Well,
recommendation.
but then as you as a
We're-
taxpayer, you
we're
go
gonna
to that
start-
meeting and
We're
tell
we're
them.
going to be doing our vouchers right now. This is gonna take, you know,
Then you'll
8 or
reopen
10
the
minutes.
hearing, right?
The whole hearing was open.
But he's saying he wants to do vouchers right now, so he'll reopen it.
It's not closed.
It's not closed? Which means that anybody who wants to ask me a question can do so?
There will be, when we finish our vouchers, there will be a time when there'll be a privilege of the floor.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know.
Should have done this before we had the hearing. Well, there's no reason why, we're gonna go into an executive session, and after that, you can talk while we're in the executive session. Where's your drive to?
Albany area.
Oh, yeah, it's 3 hours. How did we get here?
But you know, it's been a great resource.
And he referred to it as a committee, but it's I know, but it's, it is a commission.
Brian, that's that money there.
His ears are ringing.
You know, getting a dumpster for 61 bucks
And a lot of
is
stuff
pretty
to do
good.
here.
Oh, they're talking about that.
Yeah, I know, I saw that.
Oh, yeah, they're bigger than those?
Oh, yeah.
Wegmans.
I fed their work food.
Oh, yeah.
And I did mileage. Packages of, one was donuts, one was brownies, one was cookies, and one was something else.
That's for the crew that was working here.
So I got 4 packages thinking, okay, they can have 2, there's only 4 guys. They can have 2 boxes one day and 2 boxes another day.
They ate them all the first morning, yeah. Of course, of course. It's a treat for those guys.
How many, Lisa,
Pardon?
Oh, yeah.
Lisa,
A question.
how many guys you have here for?
I'm sorry?
How many guys were here working?
It was 4 the first day and 3 the second day.
Well, they did a great job.
They did a great job.
You know, all we had to do, and all we had to do is pay for the material.
Material, which is that, and we paid for
Boy, that's very reasonable.
$130 or something.
Place looks great.
It really does.
Post office.
I got 24, excuse me, 23 of them, right, Steve? See, he was a big naysayer. Yeah, but he's the one that kept saying, we don't make any money, make a buck a piece. And who was my first customer when I got the first box? I twisted your arm.
And they'll send me one for free,
I'm sure.
but I can't put that one on.
You know what, next time I'll remember to ask people
Marriages.
if it's for a camper. Yeah, my 1930 to 1960, I think it is. I put them together. Do 1 a year, right? What's that?
Sign the one for my training.
Well, you want us No. It's like Tucker used to not sign his father's bills. Is that it? Only 70.
Should've known you never make crowd, it'd be a lot of money.
Yeah, keep telling yourself that. Okay. I'm ready.
You want to wrap up the public hearing? So we're back
We
in?
can't. We're gonna wait a little bit.
That was quick, we didn't have very many. Okay, we need a resolution to enter into an executive session.
I'll second it.
Yes.
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 Good. Yeah, okay.
This will be just a few moments.
Are you inviting the town?
Yes, you're invited.